Continuing our review of the criticisms directed at the Quran, we have reached verse 34 of Surah An-Nisa. Among the collection of verses often cited as examples of ignoring women's rights and dignity in the Quran, this is one of the most important ones. Last time, we explained that the common interpretation of the beginning of this verse, claiming it discusses the superiority of men over women, is a completely incorrect understanding, and we explained the reasons for that. However, later in this verse, another topic is raised that is extremely challenging and perhaps one of the most controversial points in the Quran regarding women. This is because the verse states that if a man is concerned about his wife's nushuz, he should follow 3 stages. First, admonish her, then distance himself from her in bed, and in the 3rd stage, it is the turn for darb. Most commentators and translators have taken darb to mean beating, the nashiza, woman. But is the Quran really making this recommendation? We agreed not to rely on the famous interpretations or what has been commonly said. We agreed to refer to the text ourselves. Let us see, impartially and without relying on preconditions, what we can grasp from the text itself. To understand the meaning of this verse, we must carefully examine the meaning of nushuz and the meaning of darb. We must see what sense they carry in this verse, but even more importantly, we must look at the context and structure of all these verses in Surah An-Nisa and this set of verses we previously explained. When we read this impartially, there is no doubt that the Quran in these verses seeks to honor women and recommend good and just behavior toward them and their support. You see in verse 32, it speaks of how women must also benefit from their own efforts and the fruits of their labor, and there is no difference between men and women in this regard. Women's rights are constantly emphasized. Immediately in the following verses, this point is followed up with the issue of the man's support for the woman and being qawwam, meaning man standing up significantly to support and provide for women. Further on, the subsequent verses speak of making efforts so that the bond between man and woman does not break, that this bond remains established and this support remains. Therefore, we must better understand the meaning of this verse within this context and semantic structure. Now, with this view, when you examine the subject of nushuz in this surah, notice that the nushuz of the woman is mentioned in verse 34 and the nushuz of the man is mentioned in verse 128 of this same surah. The Quran has provided solutions and recommendations to counter this nushuz, but the recommendation provided to counter the woman's nushuz is different from the recommendation provided to counter the man's nushuz and incompatibility. Why? Look, in verse 128 it is said, if a woman is concerned about her husband's nushuz or his iras, in verse 34 only concern about nushuz was mentioned regarding the woman, but in verse 128 concern about both nushuz and iras of the man is mentioned. Why? Because the woman was and still is in need of the man's support. Therefore, the woman is worried that after the man becomes incompatible, he will not fulfill his obligations, cut off his support for her, and turn away from her. Thus, in verse 128, the woman is advised, try to reach a new agreement, a reconciliation, so that this support is not lost. And the emphasis is on peace, reconciliation, and maintaining this support. However, in verse 34, where the concern is about the woman's nushuz, men are advised to counter this nushuz in 3 stages. Stage 1, admonition. Stage 2, distancing in bed. Stage 3, darb. Now we must see what this darb means. Well, it is often said that darb here means beating. But when we see the collection of these verses, we see that beating cannot possibly be the correct meaning or harmonious with this context or even the verse itself. If a man is concerned about a woman's nushuz and incompatibility, what effect can admonishing her and distancing from her in bed have on making the woman compatible? And what effect could beating her have? Does it not usually have the opposite effect and increase this incompatibility? From the totality of these verses, we realize that these few verses speak of the fact that the support of women is the responsibility of men. Virtuous women must fulfill their obligations toward men, but when men see incompatibility from the woman and signs of nushuz begin to appear, the Quran again recommends that you do not cut off your support for the woman all at once. The woman needs your support. Therefore, this support should be cut off in several stages. Stage 1. First, you admonish and advise. If admonition has no effect, stage 2 is limiting emotional support. Distancing in bed means financial support and other supports must still remain. By reducing emotional support, you can make her realize and bring her back to the shared life. But if that also has no effect, now it is the turn for darb. What does darb mean here? See, the word darb in the Arabic language, according to what is stated in linguistic sources and origins, has numerous meanings mentioned for it. But we can find the best and most accurate meaning in the oldest and most authoritative Arabic dictionary, Al-Ayn, written by Farahidi. He says that darb means performing that specific matter which is mentioned in the context of the sentence. The word darb is used for performing any action. Therefore, you see in the Quran itself, darb is used for setting an example, darbul mathal, for moving and traveling. It appears with the meaning of creating a connection, the meaning of cutting off, the meaning of placing, the meaning of beating, the meaning of occurring, and also the meaning of preventing and turning away. Where did these meanings come from? From the context and the concept of the sentences. That is, where the concept of cutting off was relevant, when darb appeared, cutting off was understood from it. Now, with the explanations we have given, we understand that the concept of turning away, i'raz, is being delayed in this verse. It is recommending that you push this turning away back. Therefore, when it says wadribuhun, no, here it means turn away from them, withdraw from them, not that you should beat them. It means you should delay the stages of turning away. First, emotional withdrawal, and then, if that doesn't work, other types of withdrawal, meaning from financial aspects and providing for the woman, withdraw from those. In this way, a completely ethical and logical meaning, harmonious with all the verses, is obtained, and we will not fall into that strange meaning that the famous interpretation has claimed.